Okay, so we will be discussing and defining ethics as a group, exploring how ethics shape leadership and how ethical behavior is reflected in public leadership. Does anyone want to start us off?
Well, I think that ethics is really important when it comes to being a leader, especially when it comes to impacting your followers, right? So when you make unethical decisions and they impact other people, not only are you looking bad for yourself, but you're going to make your followers look bad. I was actually in a situation 10 years ago. I worked for a company that was mostly owned by a husband and wife. They owned 51% of it. And they used to have their daughter on the payroll and put it in like the line items as if she worked in the office, and they paid her allowance out of company funds. And it was like completely unethical because they had to report these funds to the other owners who owned 49% of the company, and they were basically lying and saying this money is going to her because she works part-time, and she never did. And then they tried to have us as employees write explanations of benefits for our like customers, and had false information to have them avoid taxes. And it's probably the most unethical like situation I've ever been in, and I actually ended up quitting because that's like against the law, like federal laws, and I didn't want to be involved.
Yeah, you get in trouble for that.
Yeah,
that's crazy. Did you get into trouble, or like did they get into trouble?
I have no idea. I actually quit. Like they asked me one time to do it, and I did not do it, and then afterwards put in my 2-week notice.
Well, good for you.
So yeah, the implications are just too much, right? So as a leader, when you make decisions that are unethical, like it doesn't just impact you, it impacts the people you work with. Because when it comes down to it, if they were to get busted, if they haven't already, like they wouldn't have said, I couldn't say, oh, they told me to.
Mm-hmm.
I would get in trouble too. So I think that ethics is so important in leadership, and as a follower too, to understand what decisions are ethical and unethical so that you can still protect yourself.
Just going kind of off like the followership thing, I thought that was really interesting in the chapter as well. I watched this really cool TED Talk actually about followership, and it was like, we train everybody to be a leader, but not everybody can be a leader, and to be a really strong follower who like holds their leader to a certain standard and knows what they're looking for and knows how to kind of just be a good partner and be a good person as a part of a group. Yeah, basically be a good follower, make your leader feel empowered. I thought that was interesting. And I mean, even the followers can be corrupt too, and that kind of like ethical thing. And it's interesting because even like on a small scale, followers can kind of turn to be unethical, and the leader can be totally unaware of it. So that was something that just kind of popped in my head.
Yeah, I feel like the followers, they also have to like say something to help the leader be a better leader.
Yeah, I think it's very important for leaders to be ethical, because you're not only implicating yourself in something, you're also implicating your followers. And not even like legality wise, like do you really feel comfortable putting your followers in circumstances? Like what if they have to like do something that they don't want to do? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You really have to think about it.
I think that's like comes like with creating an ethical environment. I think that can help, promote that, because then like if you make an ethical environment with like your group or whatever, then it'll be like a norm to be ethical, basically,
Yeah.
And I think that kind of goes off the challenge of responsibility, that it's like the responsibility of the leaders and the followers. Like, Lana could have just kind of kept her head down and not said anything, or even done what the leader said, but like knowing as a follower what's ethical and what's not, and when to walk away, I think is a really important like skill set to have as well.
Yeah. Speaking of the challenges, one that really like resonated with me was the challenge of power, and for people that are leaders to understand that they have a power and not to abuse it. Because I've always heard that saying, like people in power do whatever they want, but I never really like like correlated it to ethics and making ethical decisions when you're a person of power. But then if you think about it, we're exposed to things like that all the time, especially like in politics, like politicians doing crazy things because they can and they don't think they're going to get caught, right? So when I was reading like the challenge of power or the challenge of privilege, like those are the first things I thought of. Like people that are in privileged positions or that are in positions of power tend to make more ethical decisions because they can, for the most part.
And with the challenge of power thing, I kind of thought of a similar like train of thought as politics, but I thought more of if you have the challenge of power, like you can also like control the information that people have. So I've just been like reading a lot of articles lately that say, you know, like if you watch this one news station, you're going to get a different type of information than people who watch this, than people who read this newspaper or go to this online forum. And I just thought that was really interesting too, because as a leader, you kind of can have a huge influence and a huge impact on what your followers know and what you want them to know. I think they even said in here somewhere about how, I forget what president, but he sent aid to England during World War II before he even had approval of the American people or the Senate. And kind of like, all right, I'm here to make a judgment call, and it's going to fall on my shoulders, but also on the shoulders of everybody else.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like news stations and like media companies, they're biased to like Democratic and like Republican views, like CNN, and I think that's Republican, like Fox, and then there's like the Washington Post and like the New York Times and the Journal. They're all Democratic.
It's so hard because all of them, they just want to be like the first with the news. Like they're just thinking about themselves.
Yeah. And it's that challenge of information management, right? Even if they know 100% of the picture, and even if everything they're telling you is true, they only tell you the side you want to hear so that you can't make a decision for yourself, like which way to go, or you can't form your own opinion because they manage what they give you.
Yeah, I think it's important to like, you know, have someone play devil's advocate, so you're not just like so like tunnel visioned on this one mindset. Like you're taking in account of all different like people's views and opinions and trying to make sense of it and trying to find the most like ethical, you know, reasoning for it all, basically.
I agree.
I agree with that too, and it's actually really interesting. When I was doing my leadership interview, one of the girl that I was interviewing, she said, you know, that she goes to certain people when she has questions because she knows that they think the same way that she does. So that's why she goes to them. And while I could understand that, I just thought like, but where's the opportunity for growth? You know what I mean? If you're just surrounding yourself with people who are going to think the same way that you are or reinforce your same ideas, you're not really benefiting yourself, especially in your career or in like a more adult platform. You know, like with your social life, like obviously people who are like-minded to you, you'll probably wind up being friends with. But when it comes to your career, I mean, I wouldn't want to surround myself with just like yes men who agree with everything that I have to say.
Yeah, I would want to go to someone who is actually different, so I would get another opinion and then I could decide.
And think about that from an ethical standpoint. Like if I was in an ethical dilemma and I wanted to do something unethical, I would just be like, well, I'm going to go talk to so-and-so because they're going to have the same opinion I am. And it would just reinforce that whatever I'm doing was like, make me believe it's okay because this person thinks the same way I do.
Yeah, and I think that was like the situation that you described, Lana. Like, I bet like it was a mom and dad that owned the company, right?
Yeah, it was a husband and wife.
Okay, yeah. So I bet they like both like said that it was okay, and then all the other employees were like, oh, well, if they say it's okay, then I mean, I guess we can all agree. And I bet that was like an example of groupthink, I'm pretty sure. So like no one wants to speak up and, you know, risk like either getting in trouble with the law or even being fired. So I think they all just kind of agreed and like kept their mouth shut about it, even though it really was unethical.
Exactly.
It's interesting. I just remembered this. One of my coworkers actually, I've asked him like, oh, where did you work at before this? And he says, oh, I was a bartender. I'm like, oh, but where? He actually, him and his fellow servers and bartenders at the restaurant, took the owners to court for apparently taking money out of their personal services and taking money away from the restaurant at large. And so they had a settlement, and he's actually not allowed to like talk about it. So kind of similar situation, but another side of it, actually like the followers teaming up to decide what was ethical and what was unethical and like acting on that.
Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I mean, I really just want to know where he worked, but he like legally can't talk about it. I thought it was interesting too how it just says that like as a leader, not only do you have like tasks and expectations on you, but also to like kind of hold the moral compass for the company and to make everyone feel comforted who does follow you. So it's interesting because sometimes just when you think of leaders, I think you think of someone who distributes tasks and not somebody who kind of like decides which way the whole company or group is going to sway, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. And I think this goes right in line with our last discussion about credibility, because if you're unethical and people know you make unethical decisions, like it blows your credibility right there. So as a leader, like ethics is probably up there with the most important things or like quality you can have is like an ethical personality.
Yeah.
And something I found interesting was the component number 2 about moral judgment. I just think that this was like, I think it was like the most difficult to like try to understand, because at the bottom it says like base your decisions on widely accepted ethical principles. So like, I mean, everyone has like different views on ethics. So I think it's kind of like, you know, hard to find like a largely accepted ethic and just side with that, even if it doesn't, you don't really agree with it, because of it gives the situations of like, should a model escaped prisoner be reported to the police, or should a doctor help a dying patient take her own life? So we see like a lot of these issues, and we can't find like a answer or a simple solution to it because of all of these ethics. And I just think it was interesting to, you know, it just says like base your decisions on widely accepted ethical principles, even though like that's not just like, it's not so simple like that. Like it's a lot more difficult to, you know, solve these problems with just using that.
A lot of those things could be cultural too. So somebody in one culture could make one decision and it would make total sense in that culture, but then in another culture could be the opposite, but it makes sense for them. So I don't ever want to be in dilemmas like that.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the culture tie too, and also like it's interesting because, you know, there's talk of like morals and ethics, and the way that I've kind of been taught it is that ethics are kind of like more understood and morals are your personal belief. However, there's like so much gray area and there's so much overlap. And we actually, at my job, we do this like question. Yeah. We do this thing called question of the day. And it was, if you found a backpack full of $10,000 cash, what would you do? And none of us were like, oh, take it. It was all like, all right, well, is there a wallet in there? Where does the person live? Do they live nearby? You know, like, were there any other personal belongings in there? And it's like, you know, the moral thing to do is return the money. But some people even said, they're like, oh, I would drive by the house, and if it looked like a bad house, or if it looked like a really nice house, I would keep the money. And so it's just interesting because even though that's like a total hypothetical thing, like it's obvious what the moral thing to do is. You would think, but to every person, there were 6 of us, and everybody left like the discussion with a different way to go.
That's yeah. Isn't there an example, something similar in the text where it's like, if it's your friend, you might like let them bend the little, but if it's not, so you're like making your judgment based on who somebody else is, which isn't ethical at the end of the day.
That's kind of true, because it's like, if I would say it's kind of almost like nobody has hard, fast ethics, because if like one person did something, and then if my brother did it, like if like a random person killed someone, I'd be like, you're horrible. But if my brother did it, I'd be like, well, he's my brother. Like, I don't think he meant it, or like, what was the situation?
Exactly.
But we're at 14 minutes. Did anybody have anything else they wanted to discuss?
Cool. I want to talk about a little bit about challenge of responsibility. Like, get
Okay.
responsible for your followers' actions, and that's very ethical, stuff like that. But if we're going to go over time, I think
Well, you're welcome to share.
no, that was my favorite part about the text.
Oh, okay.
As a leader, you're really in charge of everybody, and like a lot of the weight goes on your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Like you carry the burden for yourself
Yeah.
and others.
Yeah,
Definitely.
responsibility.
And yeah. I think that's an interesting thing too because, everybody like wants to be a leader, but being a leader isn't the easy thing to do. It's 100% like the harder thing to do because it's yourself and everyone else.
Yeah.
But cool. So I'm gonna stop the broadcast. It's been a pleasure.